All right, good evening. Oh, I'm on. Fantastic. Wes called me about 2 weeks ago and asked me if I wanted to teach tonight. He immediately said, "Don't worry, you don't have to talk about sexuality." And I said, "Yes, I'm in." Okay. And it's a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. If y'all want to turn over to Haggai chapter 1, that's where we're going to be. We're not going to be able to have as much of like a class, like where I get to ask questions, and that hurts me, right? Because I'm a teacher at heart, and I like to have awkward silences and wait for people to say things. But it's going to be a little more of me just going through the book of Haggai, specifically chapter 1 right here. And I want you guys to know this is as much, maybe even more about me, right? I love to reground myself. I love to find places in the Bible where I can go when I feel like things are getting away from me. And this chapter is one of those. I'm an athletic director in Louisville ISD, and it's a crazy time right now, just this time of year, right? In early March, every single sport except for football and volleyball is happening. Basketball, soccer, softball, track, golf, tennis, swimming, all of it. It's all happening. So it's really, it gets away from me a little bit, right? I'm everywhere. I'm 16 different places every night. I'm going all over the place. And this chapter of the Bible kind of grounds me. And that's what we're going to talk about this evening. A little background of what we're about to read. So, the exiles have come back from Babylon. King Cyrus told them, you guys can go back. You can rebuild the temple. He even tells them, you can take gold. You can take whatever you need. Go and rebuild the house of the Lord. Go and be able to offer sacrifices again. And so they have left and gone back, and everything seemed like it was going well. And then in the book of Ezra, specifically chapter 4 and 5, we find out everything was not going as well as we had thought. And all of a sudden, there's opposition. There's people writing the new king saying, hey, do you know what they're doing down here? Did you know that they're rebuilding the temple? There's people kind of trying to booby trap them. And the king says, all work has to stop. And so that's where we find ourselves right here in chapter 1. And we're going to read 1 through 11 as we start out this evening. It says, in the second year of King Darius, on the first day of the 6th month, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest. This is what the Lord Almighty says. These people say, the time has not yet come for the Lord's house to be built. Then the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? Now this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much but harvested little. You eat but never have enough. You drink but never have your fill. You put on clothes but are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. Go up into the mountains and bring down timber and build the house so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored, says the Lord. You expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home, I blew away. Why, declares the Lord Almighty? Because of my house, which remains a ruin, while each of you is busy with his own house. Does that strike a chord with anybody? It sure strikes a chord with me when I read it. It's one of the, I've got a list of Bible verses that makes my hair stand up a little bit, and it's one of those, okay? Like it really eats at me because I know for a fact that my priorities are out of whack on a consistent basis. And every time I try to get them back in line, they get out of whack again. And so tonight, we're going to look at this chapter, and we're going to talk a little bit about priorities. We're going to talk about kind of the way that we structure our heart and our heart's desires, and we're going to use the lessons from this chapter as principles to kind of show us that, right? The first thing I want you to realize is like this happened to real people, okay? Like these are real human beings, and they were really going through this, and God really said this to them, and he called them out on it. And I believe in my heart that he calls me out on this times like right now when I get so busy, and times where, man, I look at my calendar and I literally have something every single day, right? Like you are all here on Wednesday night, and that's amazing because it is hard to be here on Wednesday night. Just being honest. It takes commitment to be here on a Wednesday and get recharged together. And tonight I want to talk a little bit just about how we can make sure that our priorities are in line, and we're gonna break it down into 3 parts. And we're going to look at something that God says right here in the book of Haggai, and then we're going to look at Jesus' take on it. And it won't take that long, I promise. And when I'm done, I'll be done. I won't drag it out, okay? The first thing that we're going to look at, though, comes in verse 2. And this one, again, this one bites at me a little bit. In verse 2, and I'm reading out of the NIV 84, it says, "This is what the Lord Almighty says. These people say, the time has not yet come for the Lord's house to be built." Right? Anybody ever make any excuses? I make excuses all the time. I used to, before I became an athletic director, I worked in high schools, right? I was a teacher and a coach, and you want to talk about excuses. You walk down the halls of a high school, you'll hear some fantastic excuses, right? But every single day we make excuses. And here you find the people of Israel, the exiles that are returning to rebuild the house of God, and things have not really gone their way. They've been told they have to stop, and they're saying, it's just not the right time. Now is not the time to do this. And I feel myself in them when they're saying that. I just, again, I grew up, I was a coach's kid. My dad coached for 45 years, which I'll have to go another 30 to match his number. Like, that's mind-blowing, okay? But he coached for a long time, and so, like, the cycle of my life was driven by in season and out of season, okay? And so even my first 15 years of being in education, the cycle of my life was driven by in season and out of season. I was either in football season or I was not. I was in what's called off season, okay? And off season is a time literally where you just prepare for the next time that you're in season, right? That's all you do. You just get ready. You do all sorts of stuff, right? The first thing that I want us to realize tonight about our priorities is that there is no off season for putting God on his pedestal where he's supposed to be. There's no time off from that. And so many times we want to say, well, I mean, it's just not the right time for me right now. I've got so much going on at home. I've got so much going on at work. My family's going through too many problems. It doesn't, like, God doesn't want our excuses, and he didn't want the Israelites' excuses. He didn't want these exiles who came back, he didn't want their excuses. He was saying, it's unacceptable that you would say the time is not yet right. And I feel that for me. I feel God pulling on me to tell you guys about that tonight. Let's turn over to Mark chapter 11, because it would be one thing if we were pulling it just right here out of this verse, but let's see what Jesus kind of has to say about off seasons, in season, off season. We're going to be in Mark chapter 11, and we're going to be in verse 12. And we're going to read 12 through 14. It says, the next day as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. Does anybody feel a little bad for the fig tree? Is it just me? Like, that fig tree didn't do anything wrong, right? But upon further examination, right, that fig tree was in leaf. That fig tree, it might not have been the time for figs, but that fig tree wasn't dying or dead. It was in leaf. It was going to produce very soon. It was going to produce figs, so much so that Jesus saw it from a distance in leaf and walked over there to it, anticipating that there would be fruit, there would be figs on that tree. And then obviously he curses the tree. We find out later in the chapter that it withers and it never does produce anything ever again, okay? But the moral of this story that I think we can find from Jesus' perspective is that God and Jesus, their expectation of us is that we are constantly in season and constantly bearing fruit. There is not an off season. There is not a maybe next year it'll be better. Maybe next time it'll be okay. Maybe once this slows down a little bit, once all my sports are out, are done in June when our last baseball team gets eliminated from the playoffs, then I'll be able, it'll be June. It might even be July. It'll be a long time. But then I'll be able to sit down and I'll be able to really concentrate on God. And God is saying, no, you can't say that now is not the right time. You can't say that it's going to be the time later. The scariest part to me about the story of the fig tree is that the fig tree was in leaf, right? The fig tree looked like it was doing everything right. And that terrifies me a little bit. Just like I bet those exiles back in Haggai, I bet they thought that they were doing good. I know it talks about in Ezra chapter 3, they rebuilt a place to offer sacrifices to God. It's not like they were being heathens. They weren't going around and worshiping all the idols of the area. They weren't going and making sacrifices to Baal. They weren't doing any of that. They seemed to be doing the right thing. And this fig tree right here, it seemed to be doing what it was supposed to do. But upon further examination, it wasn't bearing any fruit. And to me, guys, I'm preaching to the choir right here. Like I am preaching to me. It's all about keeping the right perspective and priorities and understanding. There's not a time where you're supposed to take off. Okay, and I hope that first thing challenges you tonight. I hope it makes you scary about being leafy, right? I'm scared to death of being leafy. I don't want to be that leafy fig tree, right? I want to be a fruitful fig tree. I want to produce for God. And to do that, we have to keep that right perspective. So going back to Haggai and looking at our next section. So that first one, there is no off season, right? And I'm going to keep on honing in on those points for you guys. I come from the Brent Nichols School of Preaching and Teaching, and he taught me that you just tell them over and over again what the main points are, right? So that's what we'll keep on doing that. But back in Haggai in verse 5 and 6, we kind of come to our next part. And it says, I'm going to read it one more time for you. Now this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to have them in a purse with holes in it. So the next thing I want you to know about your priorities, okay? The first thing, right, there is no off season. The next thing is that everything but God brings emptiness. It brings a void. It brings nothing, right? Everything but God is going to bring this emptiness. And I would equate it, when I just read through it, like the thought of eating but not having your fill. Y'all ever been really hungry? Like, that's what I think about. Now, I have 3 kids. I have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And my 6-year-old, we joke about how she has 2 stomachs, right? She has a dinner time stomach, and she has a snack stomach. No matter what, she said, Dad, I'm full. No, you're not. You didn't eat enough. But she really thinks she's full, but then she'll see something she really wants later, and magically she's hungry again. But when she gets really hungry, she gets a little hangry, okay, a little angry, hungry, and I equate this to that feeling of that empty pit in your stomach when you really crave food, right? That emptiness. Like everything that you could concentrate on other than God, it just leads to that empty feeling in your stomach. And the people here, these exiles, they didn't get that. And I don't get that. I do not get that sometimes. I concentrate on everything else. I concentrate on work. I concentrate on money. I concentrate on my family and trying to just put one foot in front of the other and trying to survive. Have any of y'all seen we haven't watched it, but the show on TV, the parenting show, y'all know what I'm talking about? They got all these groups. Am I crazy? You looked at me like I was crazy. I'm not crazy. It's called the Parent Test, and they got all these different styles of parenting, and they got them together, and they like had this reality show, and there was like the helicopter parent, and there was the modern day parent, there's the free range parent, like all these ridiculous things. And me and my wife were looking at each other like, where's the survival parent? Where's the ones who are just trying to like make it to tomorrow? Because that's what we are, right? Well, like that, I concentrate on my family and just trying to make it one foot in front of the other sometimes. And sometimes that can even take the pedestal instead of God. And that, like, anything that you apply yourself and put everything into other than God is going to lead to emptiness. When I read this, one of my initial thoughts was about the rat race, which I'm not in business. I've never been in business, right? I'm in education. But the rat race, right? Everybody heard the term rat race? Anybody know where that term comes from? From what? No? That term is really... it's really kind of sad. That term comes from lab mice and lab rats that they would put in the big mazes, and they would have cheese on one end, and they would release them and see how long it took them to get through the maze to the cheese, and then the next time they would do it faster, and then the next time they would do it faster, and so on and so forth. And then they would remove the cheese, and that poor rat would wander around looking for the cheese that it knew was coming. And I know that's kind of sad, isn't it? But they coined this term, the rat race, because it's an unfulfilling cycle of wanting and wanting and wanting the cheese, right? They train those mice to, as soon as you're let go, you go after the cheese. And then all of a sudden, they took it away. They coined the term the rat race. This verse right here, verse 5 and 6, it just describes to me the rat race. The thing that our country wants us to believe in is that you can work your way up, and you can be born poor and you can become rich, right? Capitalism, fantastic. And it is fantastic. But that's the rat race, right? We believe something different. We believe that everything we do should be to glorify God. And let's go over to Luke chapter 12 to get a little perspective from Jesus on this. Luke chapter 12. Man, it's already 7:30. I mean, it's okay. So Luke chapter 12, we'll be in verse 16. And let's see what Jesus says about this rat race, okay? We're going to read 16 through 21. He told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. So this guy's just like those exiles, right? He didn't learn from the past. I hope that we can learn from the past. He is just like them, maybe even worse, right? He has so much that he decides he's going to tear down what he does have to build something to hold what he's going to have, okay? And our constant need and desire for more, for more stuff. I joke with my wife because my wife is what we call a closet minimalist, okay? I don't know if y'all know what minimalism is. It's where you get rid of all your stuff. Guess what? It's really hard to be a minimalist if you have minimalist. That's really hard to say. It's really hard to be one of those if you have kids, like near impossible, because every Christmas and every birthday and all sorts of things, grandparents buy them everything, and it's just, it's a lot. But anyways, like, she has a desire, my wife does, to not have more. She has a desire to have less, to feel less cluttered, to get stuff out of the house, right? It started when we moved to our house that we live in Denton now. We lived in a town called Sanger, and we sold our house in Sanger, and we moved to Denton, and you should have seen how much stuff we took to Goodwill when we moved, just because we didn't want to put it in the truck, okay? That was the only reason. And she has this desire for less, and we're trying to train our children now to have this desire for less. And I, like, if there was one thing I could get better at that I think would benefit me with my relationship with God, it would be this. It would be the understanding that anything but God leads to emptiness, and so I should desire less things so I can be closer to Him, right? I should desire fewer things so I can be closer to Him. We have a great house, and I caught myself about a month ago looking at houses, right? Because we have a 3-bedroom house. I've got 3 kids. My 2 daughters have to share a bedroom, and my first brain says, man, Jolie's only going to be in our house for 6 more years. I would like her to have her own bedroom, right? That's what my brain told me. And I had to like stop myself and step back and be like, we don't really need that. Like, we're fine. And how often do you guys get that same mindset of, I wish I could have a little more. I wish I could just have a little more. I'm a history nerd. John Rockefeller, the famous oil tycoon, just bukus of money, would have made all these guys nowadays seem poor. His famous quote when a reporter asked him, how much is enough money? Anybody know what he said? He said, just a little more. That's what he said, which is a great quote, don't get me wrong. But it is the antithesis to what we're talking about right now, where we're saying our job as Christians is to put God on this pedestal, for Him to be our priority, and everything else leads to this emptiness. And that's what God was telling them right here, and that's what God is telling us. That's what Jesus is telling us. Let's go on to the third thing, because we're quickly running out of time. Okay, so just to review, the first thing that Haggai can tell us about priorities is that there is no off-season. The second thing is that everything but God leads to emptiness, okay? And the third thing we're going to find in verse 9. In verse 9 of Haggai, I'm going to flip back over there. Haggai chapter 1, it says, "You expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home, I blew away. Why, declares the Lord Almighty? Because of my house, which remains a ruin, while each of you is busy with his own house." All right, so the last one today, and I lied to you. There's really one more after this, but it's kind of an overarching theme. But the last major point for tonight is that you're always building something. Very similar to the fact that there is no off-season, except I want you to think about the fact that no matter what activity you are taking, no matter what you're doing, you are building something, right? In coaching, we have a saying, good coaches have a saying, And it's you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. One of those two things is going on. Every time you're around a kid, you are either coaching them to do what is right, or you're allowing them to do what they wanted, which is probably not right. You're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And I want you guys to think about that from the perspective of our lives of, like, you are either building for God or you're building your house, right? You're building your earthly house. There is no middle ground. Like, there's not a line you can walk and straddle. I used to work at a place called Camp Deer Run, and one of the, fantastic church camp, if anybody knows about it. But one of the things I love to do with kids during a group Bible time, one of the kind of activities we would do is I would draw a line down the middle of the room, and then we would, make them get on one side or the other. Do you like hamburgers or pizza? Do you like, whatever it might be? And kids will pick a side so fast, and then they'll argue for that side so quickly. Like, this is like their life depends on it. Like, hamburgers are better than pizza. You guys are crazy. And they will pick a side. They will argue for that side. And then you ask them, Jesus or the world, and they all get on Jesus' side, right? They all know the right answer, but how often are we trying to straddle that line in our lives? And how often are we saying, well, I can build my house on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then I'll build God's house on Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, right? And then Saturday I'll just sleep the whole time. And I feel like, for me personally, this is one of my biggest struggles, is the fact that I can't consistently say that I am building correctly. Let's go over to Matthew chapter 7. Let's get Jesus' perspective on it. Matthew chapter 7. And y'all already probably know what story we're about to read. So Matthew 7, verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Now, I think that Bible verse gets a little bit of a bad rap, because anytime you read it, you hear the song in your head, right? Like, you almost don't even think about the words anymore. Or maybe that's just me. We'll say it's just me. That's fine. But the power of those words right there, you'll notice there wasn't anybody who was building half out of brick and half out of sand, or half on the rock and half on the sand. It was one or the other. You are building something every single day, and you choose whether or not you're going to build God's house, or whether or not you're going to be like those people in Haggai and build your house, even if it's not the right time, even if you got a king telling you to stop, even if all these negative things are happening to you, you choose every day. And that leads us to our last point. Back in Haggai, a few times the prophet says this, and this is from the Lord God Almighty, it says, right? It's in verse 5, it's in verse 7. I believe there's one more, I can't find it. But it says, in the NIV, give careful thought to your ways. In the ESV, it says, consider your ways. And so my final encouragement for you guys tonight, and again, I want you to understand, this is just as much for me, maybe even more for me, because I need this right now. Consider your ways, right? We just read and learned a lesson from some people who maybe had their priorities out of whack. They were not necessarily, they didn't have their heart where it needed to be. They didn't have their mind where it needed to be. And they had allowed themselves slowly to stray from the reason and the purpose that God sent them back there. And God was telling them, consider your ways, right? You want to put God first. You want to have him on that pedestal where he needs to be. You want to fix your priorities. It's going to take consistent thought and like meaningful, intentional considering your ways every single day when you wake up. Consider your ways. Am I treating today like an off season? Am I making excuses? Am I filling myself with something that's going to lead to emptiness? Am I building my house today, or am I building God's house today? And my hope and prayer tonight, as we are kind of concluding, is that we'll learn from those people, the stories that God gave us in the Bible. We'll learn from the parables of Jesus, and that maybe this week we'll consider our ways a little bit. Consider our ways, consider our priorities, and try to put God back on that pedestal where he needs to be. Let's close with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this evening, God. I pray, God, that you would be with us as a congregation here at McDermott. I pray that you would continue to bless us, continue to be with us and help us grow in you, God. I pray tonight specifically that you would direct us all, direct our hearts, direct our minds to be able to focus on you this week, to be able to put you on that pedestal where you need to be, God. I pray that you would keep distraction from us, keep excuses from us, God, and I pray that you would help us to build your house. Bless us as we leave this place, God. Keep us safe, and I pray that you would just watch over us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all.